Hello, everybody, and welcome to proPUCKERS episode 5, of part of the Tundra Enthusiast News Network. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined this time by Jim Parsons, who covers the Edmonton Oilers and NHL at large for the Hockey Writers, NHL Trade Talk, and a bunch of other sites. And it's really exciting to have him on because the Oilers are in the Stanley Cup Final, so maybe a little biased, but we can get past that. But so first off, Jim, how are you doing? And I usually start off with an icebreaker about when you realized you're more likely to be writing about the NHL than playing it, making a living doing that because you've been doing that. But the icebreaker, the thing I really is on my mind is how has this season felt? Because I know you're writer first, fan second these days. But how has this season been? Just as knowing the Oilers are finally back and just like really close to winning the Stanley Cup Final, only 4 wins away if they can get it done. How's the season been?
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on. Just to answer your first question about playing hockey. I never actually played hockey at all. I've always written about it and I've been a huge fan of it, but I'm the kind of person who is so bad at hockey. I have to hit something to stop. Like that's how bad a skater I am. My wife was a college hockey player, but I was never very good at it. So I was always writing, always watching, always a big fan of it, but never a hockey player. So let's get that out of the way right away. I'm not speaking from on-ice experience. I'm just speaking from really researching and watching and covering the game for a number of years. As far as the Oilers go, the season has been ups and downs, but really overall quite fun to watch and entertaining. The Oilers have been close a number of times. They've made the playoffs the last few seasons. They've got McDavid. They've got Draisaitl. They've got a lot of pieces that mean they should be very, very good. But they started out of the gate this year really poorly. They called it a cup or bust season and had a terrible record to kick things off. And then they had to release the coach, bring in a new one, and played a whole lot better after that and have been arguably the best team in the latter half of the NHL season. And the playoffs have been a ton of fun to watch, different styles of teams they've been playing against. And a lot of fun. And they're in the Stanley Cup Final. So how can you, if you're an Oilers fan, not be happy about that? They're not the favorites in this series, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a chance to win. It's going to be competitive. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
You say like they're not a favorite. It's really a coin flip type of series. And yeah, it is interesting to mention that because the Oilers did fire their head coach early on in the season. It's been a wild ride because a lot of people picked the Oilers before the season to reach the Cup Final. Or possibly win it. A lot of people were picking them. And then everyone felt bad about their predictions. At the end of the day, a lot of people still got it right, as messy as it was. So let's kind of dive into this. Is really, as a fan without a horse in the race, just a hockey fan, this is about as exciting as it gets. You got Florida Panthers, Edmonton Oilers. It's not the best team in each conference, but you can make an argument that both teams are the best teams in their conferences. The Oilers, take away the Jay Woodcroft tenure or take away those 12 games, the Oilers have been, I think, the best team in the Western Conference or close to it record-wise. And they really, you could make an argument they would have been first place if they started the full season with him. So they've been the best team. The Panthers have been, you can make the argument they didn't finish the best record, but they also look like it. So this is just an exciting exciting series. And I think the first thing that I look at is the matchups. And I'm like, what is going to define this series? And for you, what do you think is the biggest on-ice thing? The first thing comes to mind that is going to define this series?
Probably physicality and forechecking on the Florida Panthers side, and then elite level skill on the Oilers side. The Oilers so far in the playoffs have not been a very physical team when they've needed to be. Like in a couple of games against Vancouver, they amped up the hit numbers and hit counts. But for the most part, they have not been a very physical team. They have just kind of fought back from the physicality of Los Angeles and Vancouver and just played with their skill and outskilled those two teams. Florida, however, is a very skilled team as well, but they forecheck relentlessly. They hit you like crazy. They try to wear you down. So not only are they skilled and very talented, but they're kind of bullies, right? In the fact that they really will play that style with you until you just sort of cave in. And that's sort of what happened with the New York Rangers. Igor Shesterkin was fantastic for them in goal, but that was probably the only reason that series was close. So Florida is going to try to wear down the Edmonton Oilers, and Oilers are pretty good at bouncing back from that and playing with their skill. But Florida's also got more skill than perhaps anybody the Oilers have played so far in this season. So it should be very interesting. But I think it's a physicality matchup with skill versus the elite level skill of the Connor McDavid's, Leon Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins.
For sure.
So that, I think that's the story of the series.
It is interesting you mentioned the physicality of the Panthers, because it almost like in a boxing analogy where they kind of wore down the Rangers as the series extended. They slowly gained more and more control, where the Rangers just looked gassed at the ends of the series and they looked tired. And I do wonder, if you're the Oilers, the Panthers want to set the tone. They want to get the forechecking going. They want to get the hard hitting going, especially when like Chuck is on the ice. Sam Reinhart's been good defensively as much as he's been a goal scorer. How the Oilers adapt to that? Like, what are they going to do? Because I think they could say we want to play the physical game, and maybe like Evander Kane is kind of gets more of a role in this type of series because of that, or they put on a more of a power forward structure. But what if the Panthers are trying to set the tone, especially as the series goes on, what the Oilers' contrast is to that? Because I think also part of that is the Oilers have been able to adapt, especially with Knoblauch behind the bench. So what their pivot will be if that happens.
It's probably going to have to be a speed game. The Oilers are really quick in transition. They move the puck well. They are not a slow team. In fact, the only person that you might even argue is not up to foot level speed might be Corey Perry, but he plays a different game all entirely. And so he's got that little wormy quality about him that will be unique for the Oilers. But you mentioned Evander Kane, and I think he's a really important piece to this puzzle because he's coming into this series not necessarily 100%. He got injured in Game 6 against the Dallas Stars when he delivered an awkward hit and then didn't come back in the third period. He stayed on the bench and he worked the gates, but it sounds like he's good to go for Game 1. Chris Knoblauch, the head coach of the Oilers, has said that he's going to skate on Friday and he's going to play on Saturday, but it doesn't sound like he's necessarily 100%. But then again, he hasn't been 100% all playoffs. He's been dealing with a lacerated spleen. So how effective he will be against a player like Matthew Tkachuk will be very interesting to see, because when the Oilers last played a team that had Matthew Tkachuk on it, it was 2022 against the Calgary Flames, and Evander Kane basically rendered
series
Matthew Tkachuk.
is.
Yeah,
like, they played in the regular season, but that's like a cup of coffee. Like,
no.
Yeah.
I'm talking more of the playoffs, right? Like where you have 6-7 games against the same team.
Yeah.
And Matthew Tkachuk was running wild in the first game. I think Calgary actually blew out Edmonton in that first game, but then Evander Kane decided he was going to focus specifically on Matthew Tkachuk, and he basically rendered him useless. Tkachuk did almost nothing after that, and Kane focused specifically on him. So if Kane can do something like that, even to a percentage of a degree that he did that when the two teams played against each other and Tkachuk was in Calgary, it'll be very interesting to see how effective Matthew Tkachuk will be. But again, because Evander Kane is not fully healthy, I don't know how effective he's going to be in that. And Tkachuk's a little different of a player too, right? He's learned a lot in the last couple seasons. He's very effective. He's a leader on that Florida team, and Florida's got a lot of other pieces that will be very telling for them in terms of like the Barkovs, the Carter Verhaeghes, the Sam Bennett's. They've got some really strong pieces on that team. So I'm interested in that matchup. But to answer your first question, I think it's going to be the speed. I think you got to break out of the neutral zone. I think the power play is going to be key for the Oilers. If Florida runs around too much and gets a little overzealous and gets penalties called on them, and they do get a lot of penalties called on them, the Oilers have got to take advantage of it. If they can score in the power play, I think that's key for them.
Yeah, I think that speed game and that moving the puck up ice, that actually was the first thing I thought of as a key to this series, because it goes both ways. But focusing on the Oilers' perspective, where they're trying to move the puck up ice, is Alexander Barkov has kind of become he's become the next Patrice Bergeron in line, where he's the best defensive center in the game. He won the Selke Trophy this year as the best defensive forward, and it's not just him, it's the entire roster that can trap, that clogs up that neutral zone, makes outlet passes incredibly difficult for any team to move the puck up ice at all. Pretty much they're great at, and Barkov, particularly in the middle of the ice, just takes away those outlet passes. And that, for the Oilers, I think that's going to be the interesting key. With if Bouchard is trying to move the puck up ice, or Darnell Nurse is trying to pass the puck up ice, compared to McDavid and Barkov, that's just like the one top line versus top line matchup. That matchup, I think, it's almost like whoever wins that from that perspective. But then on the other side, where McDavid's stepping up defensively, which he's done this series, which he's done in the playoffs, and the Oilers as a whole have won a lot of defensive battles. Can they do the same thing to the Panthers, where if they get the puck in in the offensive zone, and the Panthers are trying to get it out. Which team? It's almost like that's like the on both sides, on both ends of the ice, like who wins that battle is gonna. I think that's the first thing. I'm like, who's gonna win the series with that in mind, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. When it comes to Edmonton, if there's been a weakness so far in their playoffs, it's that they're a little panicky in their own zone when the pressure's on. So when Florida forechecks hard and they are a forechecking team, you will see some moments of chaos for the Edmonton Oilers. It's just the way that they play sometimes. They'll dominate, 45 to 50 minutes of a hockey game, and then the 10 minutes in which they aren't there are just pinned in their own zone, and they've got to either keep all the shots to the outside. Stuart Skinner's got to be fantastic. That's where the panic sets in for Edmonton, and that could be an area that they struggle with. That said, they have some very good defensemen who can skate the puck out of the zone. Evan Bouchard is very good. Brett Kulak has got speed. When they put in Philip Broberg for Vincent Desharnais in the series against Dallas, he's got great legs and he's got good speed. He can skate it out. So I don't think it's going to necessarily be about whether or not Edmonton just dumps it out of the zone.
Yeah.
I think if they can skate it out of the zone, that will help answer some of that Alexander Barkov dilemma. Will it always work? I don't know. He's a very good, like you said, 200-foot hockey player. He's the next Patrice Bergeron. He's fantastic, and Florida is very good at it. The Oilers are a very strong team in the offensive zone, though. Once they get momentum and once they get rolling, it doesn't really matter who they play against. Leland Draisaitl said it once. He's like, our best, we believe, can beat anyone's best. So while Florida might be the favorite in this, if the Oilers get rolling and they get momentum in that zone and they're forechecking hard because they do have some good, strong forecheckers, but they're playing with skill and they move that puck around like crazy, Florida will have trouble defending that. And every team will, no matter how good defensively they are and if they have a Barkov or not, right? I think the real question is Barkov matching up with McDavid or Draisaitl, and then who matches up with the other one, right? Because if the Oilers keep those two separate, which I think is their plan outside of power plays and then maybe certain situations, Barkov can only take one guy at a time. So who takes the other guy? And that's maybe Gustav Forsling on defense, but that's a question, right? And so if the Oilers can take advantage of that, that's helpful for them.
I think that is an interesting point because I think it's going to be McDavid versus Barkov for the most part. And I think with the note on moving the puck up ice versus passing it out with the outlet passes, McDavid's going to probably be the one carrying the puck a lot of the times out. And just to see how he matches up with Barkov is interesting. It is interesting with that Draisaitl splitting him up. They have done that, and it has given them it is the cliche of the Oilers being a top heavy roster is not true this year. And this splitting up Draisaitl with McDavid, splitting them up, not putting them on the same line has kind of proved that they're even more of a deeper team. It's helped almost spread out the depth. And in this series, that is almost like that's the first big advantage, I think, that goes their way, where it's like the Panthers have the depth, especially in their forward unit, just 4 deep lines that can play across the board. Anton Lundell has had a great postseason. They've had these players. I think what's interesting though, the Oilers in terms of scoring, if they can find goals in their second, third line, which I think is what they've been able to find a few of them enough to make a difference. Where it's like, that can almost make that can almost give them that's almost the advantage that they have in this series, which is an interesting part of it. So.
Yeah, I will agree in part that the consensus that the Oilers are a top-heavy team is partially true because when you look at the leading scorers, they're all Oilers, right? You've got McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, Evan Bouchard. They're all the guys at the top of the league. So they are very, very top-heavy. That said, they are also deeper than most people gave them credit for. The big question going into the Dallas Stars series was whether or not Dallas was a much deeper team, which is why they were considered the favorites. And no whatever, but Edmonton pretty much dominated the Dallas Stars, and the depth came through in a major way. You've got Connor Brown stepping up. You've got Evander Kane was limited a little bit in the series based on how much he could play. You had guys like Warren Fogle who scored 20 goals who didn't even play the last few games. You had guys coming out of the lineup for people like Corey Perry, Sam Carrick, others to come in. The Oilers have options. Right? Like they are deeper than people think that they are. And so that will be a key here. If the Oilers can get some depth scoring and some production from the lower 6, that will be big for them. But they will, sink or swim based on how Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Zach Hyman, those guys need to step up. They need to do it. I think they will. This is their time, right? This is their chance.
This is the final.
This is what they've been waiting for the longest time. And you never want to bet against guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They are proven to be big game players. And this is the biggest series that they will ever play in their entire careers up to this point. So if they don't step up, I'd be shocked. I mean, it's hard to think about how they could get more production than they already have. Somehow they're going to do it. Like don't ever bet against those two, because I think it'll be huge.
It's like Zach Hyman has 14 goals in 18 games, which is like an incredible pace. This is one of the other keys that I was thinking about, and this is kind of leads into it, is the power play for both teams and the special teams really as a whole. And there's one interesting stat that the Panthers have scored 14 of their 55 goals in the playoffs on the power play, and the Oilers have killed the last 28 penalties in a row. It's like the penalty kill. It was the funniest thing seeing social media blow up about, like, go figure, the Oilers penalty kill is their strength, and that's what's leading them, because everyone knows the Oilers power play is one of the best in the NHL. It's been for a while, and it's like talking about the star players leading the way. It's McDavid and Draisaitl. They're getting the power play. They have the extra. Hyman has the extra ice to get those shots off. And I think that almost like within that, like if the Stars take over on especially on the power play, can they win the series that way? I mean, the Panthers penalty kill, I think his strength has been improved since. It's also like one of the better units out there. So like, but they're I mean, it's gonna be it's almost like that's like the other battle within, like, the Stars taking over on the power play almost.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch their power play, because when you look at the Dallas Stars series, that was actually not very good. It was 0 for until game 5, and then they
4 in a
were
row,
really
I think,
strong
right?
in game 5, and then they were perfect in game 6, and then the Oilers power play just started clicking again. Here's the thing. I mean, they said Los Angeles, when Edmonton played Los Angeles, that the Kings had a very good penalty kill, and the Oilers just dismantled it. Like they destroyed it. It wasn't even funny. They were clicking over 50% during that series, right? Which is unheard of. The Florida Panthers, any team that goes up against the Oilers power play, when the Oilers power play is firing on all cylinders, you can't stop it. They have so many looks, they have so many options, and when you think you've got all the answers, they change the questions, to steal a phrase from Roddy Piper, right? They just absolutely will destroy you if their power play is clicking. So you cannot take penalties against the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. So it's very interesting that their power play wasn't very effective at the beginning of the series against Dallas. So they beat Dallas without that power play. When those final 2 games, that power play started clicking, the games weren't close, right? So that was very interesting in that respect.
It is interesting because, like, the power play, I think they scored 2 goals in game 5 and 2 goals in game 6 on the power play. And then when they won those games 3-1 and 2-1. So it's almost like, go figure, like, then the power play actually was the difference for them in that series.
Well, yeah, and it was interesting because they chose, after scoring those 2 goals, to play a on your heels defensive hockey game, which made it look chaotic, right? It made it look panicky and way more stressful than it needed to be. Yeah. And that was a choice by the Oilers. I'm not sure why. I don't think they should play that way, but that's what they do sometimes. And so they played defensive hockey for 45 minutes in those 2 games, right? Yeah. Just to hopefully not let Dallas score, which I don't think you should do that against Florida. You should just press and put the pedal down if you can. I think Florida's too good to play that way. But the penalty kill's been amazing. Nobody would have thought coming into this series or in the playoffs at all that would be what we're talking about, right? When you look at the Oilers penalty, they've got some very good penalty killers, and they added to 2 good ones in Sam Carrick and Adam Henrique at the trade deadline. Both of those guys kill penalties too. They're very, very good at it. Can they maintain a perfect record against Florida? I don't think that'll happen. But I think it'll still be a strength of the Oilers. And if they can, because they're so confident right now, they feel like it. They're all buying into the same system. They're playing it the way they should be. So I think it will be helpful for them. I don't think it'll go perfect. I don't know if they'll break the league record, which I think is 32 sent by St. Louis, but they've played really, really well. And that's what I think gives the Oilers a chance. 5-on-5, they've been good. Their power play, when it's clicking, is unstoppable. And their penalty kill's been fantastic. So when you put those 3 things together, if all of them are firing at the same time, I think the Oilers got as good a shot as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting because, like, I'm wondering, like, what if the Panthers can win this, it will have to come from a few power play goals. They will have to break through that, and right now it just doesn't look like the Oilers are giving up any of those. I want to hear, like, before we switch gears, I want to hear, like, what other, you have any other big keys that stand out, or big matchups that you're thinking, okay, this is what's gonna take over the series?
One of the things that I'll be closely watching is the goaltending. Sergei Bobrovsky is being the Sergei Bobrovsky that people know him that he can be. Has he been inconsistent in the past? Sure. But he's
Mhm.
playing really, really well this season. Stuart Skinner is going to be a very interesting part of this equation for the Edmonton Oilers. There are times where he looks fantastic. When you look at his save percentage against Dallas, I think it was like 0.923, which is just above Bobrovsky's. But when you look at a couple of the games against Vancouver, he was like sub 900, even sub 800, I think at one point. Like he's been up and down. If you get the Stuart Skinner who played against Dallas, I think the Oilers goaltending is as good as Florida's goaltending. If you get the Stuart Skinner who played a couple lousier games against Vancouver, and the Oilers didn't help him much in that regard, they gave him some pretty grade A chances, so it's tough to blame him for all of that, then that could be a problem for the Oilers. Now, they do have Calvin Pickard, who's played really well, and even on a Black Ace reserve, they've got Jack Campbell. But if it gets to that, if it gets to needing Pickard and it gets to needing Campbell, the Oilers are going to be in trouble. So I think Stuart Skinner really
I don't
needs
think
to play well.
you want to hear Jack Campbell's name really.
No, that would be like in Vancouver where the sky is falling, and then all of a sudden you got to go to Arthur Seelovs because you have no other option because Demko goes down, and then you Tasty DeSmith. Like that's where that would happen. But if Stuart Skinner's not playing well and you have to go to Calvin Pickard, I think advantage definitely goes to Florida. But if Stuart Skinner plays as Stuart Skinner can play and has played in some of these playoff games, I think it's a dead heat between the two.
You mentioned Jack Campbell. I was like, that's like the thing that, especially heading into the Cup final, Ken Holland kind of wants everyone to not think about right now. Cause like everyone's talking about, oh yeah, the Oilers have built up a great team. Look at all the great moves they did. And we're just going to forget about Jack Campbell for now because Zach Hyman was a good signing. Matthias Ekholm was a good trade. They've made, I mean, they're not here without the moves they make, but you just for the sake of, let's not think about the Jack Campbell thing for now. The 5-year deal that I think I think it was a $5 million cap hit or something like that. They're just gonna for now. Let's just not focus on that. It's almost like we're just gonna think about Stuart Skinner and how he's looked great since being benched in Game 3 or something.
Knock on wood that they never have to get to that point in the series. But I will contend this one thing, and if they go to Jack Campbell, I think it's a problem because the Oilers will probably have bigger fish than just having to go to Jack. But if you remember last season, Jack Campbell was excellent in the playoffs. Stuart Skinner struggled. Campbell came in and played very, very well. And they ended up going back to Skinner because Skinner was a starter. And that proved to be a mistake. Had they kept Campbell in net, who knows what would have happened in those playoffs. But you are right. If the Oilers have to go to Jack Campbell, there are bigger problems than having to go to Jack Campbell with the Oilers game. But this is one of those like injury, weird things. Knock on wood, none of that happens for the Oilers and everybody stays healthy in the series and the best beats the best, whatever that turns out to be. But yeah, Jack Campbell is one of those guys where it will be good that he's there if they absolutely need him. But you hope they don't need him because that's a whole bigger fish and a whole pot that you don't want to have to jump into for the Oilers.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that, but yeah, I mean, the goaltending is also like at the end of the day, like I said twice in the past few shows that I'm gonna bet against Stuart Skinner because I think he's gonna turn into a pumpkin, and both times he proved me wrong. So I'm just not bothering with that anymore. But shifting gears a bit, you mentioned the star players, you mentioned the elite players. Which star player do you have who do you think is going to take over this series, is going to win this series for them? And I guess you could hedge your bet and say this is your Conn Smythe pick. There's a lot to choose from. Obviously, there's the main cast of characters. There's also some underrated stars like Zach Hyman, who had 54 goals, I think, this season and had 14, 18 games. You have Sam Reinhart, who had 57 this season, and you have Carter Verhaeghe, who's 9. You have Barkov, who's been playing great. You just have stars everywhere, which is why it's like such a great series to like sit back and enjoy because it's going to be star power everywhere. But who's your star that you're going to takes over the series, and if you want, say wins the Conn Smythe for that reason?
I don't know how you go against Connor McDavid. I know that's probably the easy pick, and that's the one probably most people would make. And there will be arguments that Leon Draisaitl will step up his game and play very, very well. My only concern with Draisaitl, and he plays through everything. He plays through pain. He plays through injury. He will play through that if that happens in this series. Again, knock on wood that doesn't happen. But he will be the kind of player that maybe you look like it halfway through the series is like maybe he's dealing with something. But David's just going to find another level. This is a player who has done that in the past, has proven that when it matters the most, he will step up. And he's been, as good as his scoring has been in the playoffs, there have been 3 or 4 games where he's been held off the score sheet. And so the Oilers are still playing well, even despite that. I don't think that happens in this series. I think McDavid just finds another gear, whatever that is, and he plays out of his mind. And so it's hard to bet against him. I think Evan Bouchard will be a very strong player for the Oilers. He's been unreal in these playoffs. Matthias Ekholm will be an underrated player that nobody talks about as much as they should.
Yeah.
I think he's fantastic. He should have been in the Norris Trophy conversation, but it's McDavid all the way. I just don't know how you bet against him.
It was funny you mentioned the Norris Trophy because, like, I think he would have been in the Gustav Forsling conversation of like defensive defenseman award. I would call it the Jacob Slavin award. Anyway, enough of that. But it's funny you mentioned McDavid, but Tkachuk and Bouchard. Those are the three players I wrote down. I was like, if those, it's the chalk where it's McDavid who, yeah, he could take over the series. He's taken over games before where he scored 3 goals, 4 goals, where it's like he just there's that highlight play that I just keep thinking about. As you mentioned McDavid, I keep thinking about when he skated on his own through the Rangers defense and just put it in the net to tie it. One of the greatest goals like I've ever seen, probably anyone's ever seen. He has had a ton of these moments, and he could take over a game at any point. And I think McDavid, yeah, it's like if you're going to pick one player to do it, it's him. And I think what's fascinating about McDavid is that this playoff run has shown that he's a complete player, that everyone knows him for his offense. But in this playoff run, he's using his speed to his advantage defensively, where he's closing down on skaters, he's creating turnovers. And the bigger thing is his value of possession, where he can control the puck and just hold on to it, where you're seeing that, okay, yeah, he can not only impact the game offensively, but if needed to, if this series does become a slower, more physical series, a more defensive series, he can adapt to make it that type of series. I would also go Tkachuk on the other end, just like a complete player. He can really win with the physicality too. He's been clutch in the playoffs as well. But and then yeah, you mentioned Bouchard, but you mentioned Bouchard. Yeah, I think has 6 and 21 assists. So it's like
it's crazy what he's done. Yeah, he's just shy of 30 points so far. Barkov's my pick on Florida side. I didn't give you one for them, but it'll be because he's able to somehow limit McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't think you could stop these two, but you can slow them. And if anybody's going to be able to do it, it'll be Barkov. Forsling will be a big part of that, but I think Barkov will get the credit for it. Like if the two of them are even and both did a very good job of shutting down Draisaitl and McDavid, then it'll be Barkov who gets it because he's Barkov. Right, like that's just the NHL will vote for him.
The only way like Forsling really would then get it is along with having an exceptional series is if he like has one of those like where Bobrovsky's out of the net and Forsling like dives in front of a shot and blocks it. One of those like we've seen it before, like, but he's also there's a ton of almost because there's so many stars, like so many good picks to pick for almost your Conn Smythe winner. So Jim, I've been hearing a bunch of your picks, a bunch of the conversation. I think we know who you're going to pick, who wins and why. If in case the background photos and the pictures,
I'm certainly in the minority on this.
who do you have winning and why?
I'll be taking Edmonton in 7. My brain says it's probably Florida. They are the favorites going into this, but Dallas was the favorites going into that series, and Edmonton played very well against the Dallas Stars. I just have a really hard time betting against what McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Hyman, Kane, Ekholm, guys like Henrique, who haven't been back there in a long time. It's been a decade since Ekholm's been back there. Florida was back there last season. I know people are talking about that being an advantage for them, but they're fresh off another loss. I don't know if that's as huge an advantage. They are motivated for sure, but they know the sting of losing much more freshly than the Oilers do, who have never been to the final with this group, right? And so I think that the Oilers will put up a major fight. It's going to be an extremely close series. And if they are healthy, and that's going to be the biggest asterisk for me, if they can stay healthy through this series, being worn down and hit a lot by the Florida Panthers, I will pick Edmonton in 7. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting series. That's my heart talking. That's my gut saying McDavid and Draisaitl will turn this whole thing up. I know when we do these things, you're not supposed to be biased, but I am an Oilers guy. So I will go that route. But I think Florida's got a very, very strong shot. So it's like 51-49 for me in favor of the Oilers. It's very close.
It really does feel like a coin flip. And for me, as you were talking, the whole week I've been going back and forth. And as you're talking, I'm still going back and forth. Like this conversation has kind of swayed me a little towards the Oilers, where I'm like, their power play. If the series, everyone, the whole theme of the playoffs have been, if we play 5-on-5 hockey, we would have won the series. But hockey isn't played 5-on-5. There are going to be penalties. There are going to be power plays, and the reality is, like, the Oilers have I would say the advantage special team wise. So I'm leaning more that. I really want to see McDavid, best player in the world, deserves to win the cup. It's kind of like when Ovechkin was in the cup, everyone was rooting for Ovechkin to finally win the Stanley Cup after years of coming up short. I'm rooting for that. I want to see the Oilers get it. The bottom line, I'm still going to pick the Panthers in 7. I think aside from they were there last year, and I think that's a slight advantage. I mean, the Oilers have been in the playoffs also a lot recently, and like they talked about their sweep against the Avalanche a few years ago, that they understood, okay, this is what it takes to get past the Western Conference Final. So it's not like, oh, the Oilers don't have this experience, like they don't know what it's like to win in the playoffs. The one thing that I will say that it comes in does make a difference is I think Tkachuk can take over the series in a way that, like, yeah, sure, McDavid can. I think when it just comes to the physicality, and like, you need a clutch goal from Tkachuk, which he's had a few of them in the playoffs. And I mean, I'm keep mentioning him, and I know Oilers fans definitely do not want to hear Tkachuk beating them, because like his tenure with the Flames, that was him. They just had those rivalries, and if he wins a cup before McDavid, that could just be a brutal one. But I mean, I'm 7. I think it's going to go the distance. I think a lot of close games, a lot of overtime games, but I'm still leaning the Panthers. You might ask me tomorrow, I might say the Oilers, but it's that close. It really does feel.
That's fair. I mean, you're in the majority. I mean, Pierre LeBrun put out an article on The Athletic today asking 33 executives, and it was like 4 picked the Oilers, right? So it's the Florida Panthers are the favorites here, and I understand why, based on their team, based on their experience, based on a lot of factors. I think just that the Oilers have that it thing, that question, like, can they do what no one is expecting them to do, and will these players step up? And I think they have that, so that's why I'm going with them. But I would not be at all shocked if the Florida Panthers win this.
In their defense, they do feel like not Team of Destiny gets thrown around a lot, but they do have that feeling of like, this is their year. Everything that has gone right for them really has, especially since
especially after the way it started.
Yeah.
Right. Considering they dug themselves out of the biggest hole since maybe the St. Louis Blues came back and won the Stanley Cup. The Oilers just started so poorly and found a way and played some of the best hockey.
I think it was 3-9-1 was their record under Woodcroft, and then they got rid of him. I think he could still be a good coach, but like, now the Chris Knobloch hiring just changed everything. I mean, really, they have looked like a complete team, and it really shows that you can go either way. Running low on time, so Jim, any quick plugs, articles you're working on, big stuff? You do a lot of things, obviously, so
sure.
Anything you could quickly plug?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. No, it's busy time for me because I do cover the Edmonton Oilers a lot. So you can check me out at the Hockey Raiders. I do the NHL news and rumors every day, plus the Oilers content, even some stuff for Toronto. I own a site called NHLTradeTalk.com, and then I've been doing a couple things over at the Hockey News too. So you can find me on a lot of different places, but I'm busy right now because the Oilers are still in it, and that's the team I mostly cover. Yeah,
this is like busy time. This is like what the hockey, us as hockey fans, we're sleep deprived, but this is what we live for.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I mean, this is, it's going to be great. I'm really excited. Thank you for joining, and thank you for everyone for joining for another great episode of proPUCKERS. This is the 5th one, which our honorary captains have to be Aaron Ekblad and Cody Ceci, because I mean, it's the final. We have to go with those two. But thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share, and we'll tune in next time for another great episode. Thank you.